I'll be honest, I'm not ready to record at all. In the ancient times, humans developed language to express and communicate to other people and would help preserve history, and I'll be using this medium of language to complain when videos do this for padding the runtime with the history of everything. You're not smart when you do this. In fact, it makes you look dumb because you're wasting time. Sorry for the tangent of this video. This will be my English project. It's going to be kind of long, so strap in. I was given the chance to do mostly whatever I wanted, and with that, I just decided to do a tier list video. I know this is going to be like the third one I did in this channel. They're fun to make, and they're easy, and I want to do something interesting. Before we start, to anyone in my English class, which is going to be only my professor since she's the only one watching this, I will not be covering all of the stories we've read throughout because it will be very long and I don't want to keep this video very long. I'm also not going to be reading this out loud. I'll put a graphic on screen to show like what I'm reading or examples of the poetry, but it's not going to be anything interesting. If you are interested in these works, I'd recommend reading them yourselves. I know, I'm gonna give you guys homework on this. Although it's not all that bad, some of the works we did a lot were of poems and you can read them pretty easily, and some of them are very nice, and honestly it kind of helped with the class because I was very interested into this stuff. And yes, that is coming from a guy called Math Dash, so it's very difficult to impress me with literature. The last thing I'll mention before we start is that I'm going to be combining the works together since they're based off the authors in the book that I read, so it will be kind of skimming through a lot. I'll mention some of my favorites here and there, but mostly this video is going to be kind of fast. So my apologies in advance if I don't go into a lot of detail about every single poem. If you want me to go more in depth about which poems you want me to talk about or what my opinion is, let me know in the comments. It doesn't even have to be from the book I read. If you just want to recommend me a random short story or poem, I'll feel free to read it and talk about it in the comments. Hopefully. I don't know if anyone actually cares about this stuff. And the last thing I'll mention is how the tiers work before I begin. Real quickly, we have the top tier being iconic, ones that I will hopefully remember even after the class ends. There's the pretty good tier, as you can imagine, they're pretty good. The average tier, as you can imagine, they're average, and the not that interesting tier, which is for those that I don't remember and didn't really appreciate that much. With that being said, let's begin. I don't know what I'm gonna do in this video. I feel so cringe already making this. The yellow wallpaper. Starting on a high note, this story is pretty good. I'd say great even, and almost iconic. Psychological horror honestly isn't that interesting anymore since it's been overdone to the point of repetition and cliche. I mean, even horror generally is just pretty cliche nowadays. So it'd be very hard to impress me with something like psychological horror. And even though this medium is text, I found it to be pretty good at the psychological horror aspect. Feeling of insanity and fear in the story is great about the woman who goes unnamed, which is a very interesting detail in the story, being in the time period 1860 to 1943, which you can imagine wasn't that good. And it was very interesting to see, all these expressions in the story of this almost horror aspect. It's a very scary story. And it's another thing how interesting the perspective is, because we're in the perspective of this woman who we don't know the name of again. And when we were discussing this in class, it was almost as if we were discussing an unreliable narrator, someone who maybe can't be trusted when we hear it. It's one that I would really recommend if you want to feel like you would just need a little bit of a pinch of psychological horror. It's a really good story. I would really recommend it. I don't really have any criticisms, but I'm not going to put it in iconic, mainly because I can't remember much of the actual contents. I just remember the theme of the story being executed well, and for that reason, it'll be going in the pretty good tier. To Build a Fire, one of my personal favorites, mainly because I'm a Long Dark fan. You might know this story from the animation made from it, and while it is really good, I would recommend seeing it. You won't believe this, but the book is different from the movie. I know, shocking revelation. Set in the Alaskan Yukon, a guy going to camp to find gold goes wrong. That's mostly what you need to know about it. It's mostly just him going more and more and more desperate as he gets colder, things go wrong, and there's a really good story behind it. Another one I would recommend reading, as I'm not going to read it out, and it's really hard to do it justice, as I enjoyed it, and it's just really cool to see this almost desperation. Actually, in the beginning of the story, there's this almost ego as the guy doesn't really care about the advice, and then there's this one line of him saying, like, I knew it, I should have listened to those guys. Come to think of it, actually, that kind of makes it a psychological horror in itself. Overall, it's pretty good. I wish I remembered more about it, and for that reason, it's probably not going to go in iconic. In my heart, it might be iconic, like the story itself, but not like the actual contents. I might say that a lot this video, but I think this is gonna go in, again, a pretty good tier. Robert Frost. You've definitely heard of this guy, or at least heard of his most popular poem, The Road Not Taken. It's definitely very iconic. If you guys haven't read it already, you guys take an English class? This is in every English class. You guys need to read this story. And honestly, just read it again. It's just really good. But don't read it as like advice, read it as an actual story. Many people mistake this as like advice, like, oh, you have to choose which path you gotta go down. And it's like, no, that's not the point of the story. The point of the story is like, because I took this path instead, it made all the difference. Many people mistake this as advice, but it's not advice. It's a life experience, and Robert Frost is very good at these life experience kinds of stories. In fact, this is his most iconic story, but his other stories also are really good, and reading them, I feel like there's almost a connection with life and nature. I mean, you can see it in the titles of his poems, like After Apple Picking, Birches, The Woodpile. Fire and Ice is a really good one. It's not that long. I'd recommend reading it now. Although, spoilers, you will have to know about Dante's Inferno, otherwise it's not going to make that much sense. It's not that easy to put this in anything below iconic. Like, what criticism can you say? They're all very memorable. And honestly, I'm going to put this in iconic tier. I'm pretty sure no one would object to this. E. Cummings. Another good poet. Looking at his poems, the first impression might be, why is it written like this? But if you look deeper, you might see the genius of his work and just the way he writes things. People forget about the written language, that things like periods, spaces, parentheses are also part of the language. And E. Cummings takes this to another extreme, using these almost breaks and these tools of language, the written language I should say, in English, I don't know about the other ones, to make this very distinct writing style that you don't really see in a lot of other poetry, and I really admire him for that. Just using these little spaces and these parentheses to put detail and to put emphasis on words is a very clever idea. It's a very clever idea, that's what I would say, and I wish I thought of it. That would have made me smart. Well, that's why E. Cummings is smart, because he thought of this, not me. And it will definitely take you multiple tries to read his poems and try to figure out what it means. I do like his writing style a lot, but the actual poem's contents kind of aren't as memorable as I once thought. I feel like I like his writing style more than his actual poems. Maybe that's a bit mean, but for that, I can't, in good conscience, put it in iconic tier, because I can't remember his poetry, and if we're judging off of that, it's not as iconic as something like Robert Frost, you know? So for that, I'd say he's going in the pretty good tier. Howl by Allen Ginsberg. That sounds weird. Am I doing like a reader voice? Howl by Allen Ginsberg? It's another personal favorite of mine. Honestly, it's a short story that will only get better with age. And I wasn't going to put it at the top tier at first, mostly because it's very strange when reading it, but kind of thinking about it more, this poem just feels very raw and emotional. It just feels like the most emotional, like we're looking into someone's thoughts and just hearing what they're saying or reading what they're saying. It's really good, and I can imagine this being like a speaker event or even a public speaking event. It's just very emotional and very raw. It's not hard to see what it's about. You know, anti-America, I know, very original idea, but it has a very nice go for it, you know? It's very, I mean, at the time period, it wasn't that great either, and many people were fed up a lot of the time. It's not a different from our time. And to me, it's almost like a fine wine. It will only get better with age, and the more you age as well, the better the poem will be. Or poem, short story. It's not a poem. It's just really good. Iconic tier. Definitely an iconic tier. This is one that I'm gonna remember for a while. Emily Dickinson. Average, the most average poems I've read. They're sweet, they're fun, they're nice. I think I used this quote before, but you just put them on a wall, you know? They're just good to read every once in a while. Nice to see, put in a quote, but they're not that memorable. In fact, even the titles aren't that memorable. They're like stuff like 39 and 1072. I'm pretty sure this isn't numbers. They're pretty forgettable. I'd be nice and put them in average, but honestly, I think they're going in not that interesting tier. We read Robert Frost. My standards are high. Elizabeth Bishop. I'm gonna redo that take. Elizabeth Bishop. Elizabeth Bishop. Elizabeth Bishop. Also kind of average. Maybe oversimplifying this, but it's like a longer Emily Dickinson. Feel free to comment if I'm wrong. If anyone cares. Like, is anyone watching this video? It's nice poems to read, pretty lighthearted. They're like treats, you know, like what I said about Emily Dickinson, but they're pretty forgettable, and it's pretty cool to see the author write about simple things like an armadillo or the fish or the waiting room, but they're not that interesting, and I don't really remember that much about them. Although I'm not going to put them in not as interesting, because there is one that stood out to me, which was One Art. It's really cool, and I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the wording there. And as someone who's learning to do art, it's a very nice poem to read after all of that. So for that, it'll go an average. Eudora Welty's Petrified Man. Now, unfortunately, I can't personally relate to the story. Regardless, it's still really good. And I feel like it's a very big work of its time, if that makes sense. It's just the life of a black woman during 1939. It's about gossip at a hairdresser, and it's really well written. And I really enjoyed reading it. The characters feel like they're properly characterized. I know that's like not that amazing, but in this day and age, it's hard to get. And it's really good. Reading this script now, this line kind of feels weird, but it's like I'm looking into the hairdresser and just seeing like what's going on. You're looking into the gossip, you know? This is not going in iconic because it's not going to stick with me that much, but it's in pretty good tier. Wallace Stevens, another favorite of mine. They're really hard poems to read, and it took me a while to understand what they mean, and I did end up getting help from Google. I know, it was that hard to interpret. They're really creative, and they're really fun to read in my opinion. The two poems I remember the most were The Emperor of Ice Cream and The Disillusionment of 10 O'Clock. The Emperor of Ice Cream is a really good take on a funeral, and yeah, I had to Google this because read this right now and tell me you wouldn't see a funeral here. But I really like the representation of death as the Emperor of Ice Cream. You know, it's like ice cream doesn't last that long, and it's very sweet, but it's a very short feeling, you know? I thought it was really well done. And of course, there's only one Emperor of Ice Cream. It's a really good poem, and I really like it. And The Disillusionment of 10 O'Clock, it was very nice. And it's about imagination, and reading it, you've kind of, like, I felt like I understood him and understood why he writes the way he does. And after reading it, it gave me a big appreciation of all his other works. It was really good. In fact, not good, just great. That's why this is going in iconic tier. Just ones that I'm gonna remember for a while. William Carlos Williams. His poems feel very romantical, at least the ones I've read, like To Else, The Young Housewife, and Portrait of a Lady. and he also made The Red Wheelbarrow. They're all really good poems. They feel very connected to life and very simple and fun to read. They're very good, I would say. There's not much else to it. I don't know, I don't remember that much, and they're not as memorable as other people. I don't hate it. In fact, I said his work is great, and I would recommend it to friends, but it's like not something that I can tell you what they're about that much. Again, I'm gonna repeat myself. We have Robert Frost, and I just talked about Wallace Stevens too. Again, my standards are pretty high, so it's gonna be hard for me to judge a lot of these. So it's just gonna go in average tier. Sylvia Plath. This one is definitely going in iconic for one reason: offensive language. I can't say it a lot here on YouTube because they will demonetize me. Wait, I don't make money from these videos. But she does talk about German things in her poems, specifically 1930s to 1940s German things. My English professor said that she was the only poet who got away with this kind of stuff. And yeah, I cannot imagine someone writing like this in the modern era. Or forget the modern era. I can't see like anyone writing this even in her time period. But she did. And I love it for that because they're really good poems. It's kind of like what I said about Allen Ginsberg. They feel very raw, very emotional at times. And you can kind of tell that the author didn't have a good time growing up. It's very good. Her poems almost make me feel angry, but like in a good way. Kind of like a stress ball or stress reliever, if that makes sense. Like a workout routine. They're just really good. And they're really heavy poems. This one, like I said, it's going in iconic tier. Yusef Komunyakaa, reading his poems feel very motivational, you know? Something I'd see on YouTube shorts, like with workout footage or sports footage, you know, and with that music. I remember him from Slam Dunk and Hooks. It's a really good poem. Take note if you're reading this, which, again, I don't think it's anyone, that the poem implies basketball, but when you actually read it, there's nothing that, like, outright says it's basketball. In fact, when I was reading this for the first time, I thought to myself, oh, it's almost like a battle. And when I searched this up, many people thought it was almost like the battle of life, and it was very tough, you know? Life is tough, and you gotta tough it out, and there's a lot of things in it that you have to be tough about, and it's a really good read for that. I would recommend it. His other poems are like that too. They feel very tough, you know, very strong, and that's why I feel like they belong in the pretty good tier. Kind of bordering on average, but I feel like something hooked me more than the other poems. And finally, Audre Lorde. I don't want to be mean or anything, but despite being one of the more recent ones, I cannot remember much. In fact, I'm reading her poems right now while I'm watching the script. I just cannot remember anything from her poems that like made me feel anything. Nothing really stood out to me that much, and nothing really grabbed me from her poems. They had nice messages, but they weren't really that strong of a contender. Like I said, we have a lot of good poets here and a lot of cool stories. So for that, it's gonna go into not that interesting tier as well. So yeah, those are the poems that I tier listed, as well as short stories since we had some of them here. It was pretty fun. There's some pretty good ones, some pretty average ones. I wouldn't say any of them are bad per se, and I enjoyed it, even if I can't remember most of it. I hope you guys enjoyed watching this for like the two people still here. I'm glad you guys care about literature as much as I guess I do, or YouTube videos. If you guys want to see more of this, please do not subscribe. I'm not going to be making more videos like this since I'm not going to be reading much. Though I would like to see some comments of what you guys think about these poets here. If I missed something, what you want me to say about them. I like comments. I like reading them and discussing them with you guys. They're a fun part of making YouTube videos, so if you guys would do that, that would be fun. And I would share my opinions with you. Just not on long books, because I'm not going to read them, unless I've already read them. This is my channel stuff now. Sorry for the lack of uploads. I procrastinate a lot, and then college finals kind of hit me, and there was stuff I wanted to do, but I need to finish this project more than anything, so hopefully you guys enjoyed reading this project while I work on other stuff. I have a trip to London, so I'm not going to be making videos until I come back, and my next semester in college is not going to be that busy. I'll try to make some more stuff because there is some more stuff I want to make, but I've been busy learning art as well, so hopefully you guys will stick around for that if there's anyone who wants to. Thanks for watching. Hopefully, I'll see you again soon.